You all realize it's February? So that means that this coming Saturday is our retreat. If we've got a little bit more room, if you haven't already signed up and you care to join us, it's 10 to 4. Think bring your own lunch. And we'll be here for the day. We are also moving, not quite yet, but we're in the mix of moving our recordings to YouTube. And more will come about that and how to access it. We're starting to look at what we're doing and how we're doing it and what we might do differently in order to better support everyone that wants to be part of this Dharma.
It's a really nice chant. Um, when I say it's a nice chant, I mean uh, it shifts the atmosphere around you, and it can actually draw you up into the vibration of the chant. That particular chant is Buddha Master's heart mantra, and basically the chant is the uh, offering of all of his attainment to everyone who comes within the sound of his voice or the sound of his teaching. What a great gift um, to the one who can receive it. What a great aspiration for all of us to have. Sometimes, well, I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't cry over spilled milk. But my spilled milk is not the things that this world gives me. But I cry because I realize that my aggregate of action is dissolving. And so there is a natural limitation, just a natural limitation on what I can now do. And so I regret all the years that I've spent doing other things. Oh, I did a lot of Dharma things too. But I regret that I squandered a lot of my life on unessential worldly exploits, explorations, activities, thoughts, pleasures, because I do see the emptiness of it all. So I just want to encourage you today to not squander your life. There's a song that we used to sing in church, and it was saying, "Work, for the night is coming." And it's not just when we think we're young that the night, oh, it's not coming. It's forever far away. But sometimes we are old and we still don't see the night coming. So I take with great humility and pleasure these teachings of Buddha masters, and I've become less and less inclined to share them with ones who don't value them. One hand, I want everybody to get it, because if you get it, you'll get something. But then they have become so rich and infinite in their value that you want to treasure it as a special offering for one who would value it. So there's these two kinds of balls juggling in the air. One who doesn't want to cast pearls before swine, and the other who wants to offer something that can take root and bear fruit maybe in another season. So I'm constantly in my humanness struggling with what would be of use and what would be of value in a particular moment. because every page has such gems, uh, these priceless gems, but only if one is mining. We have to be mining to find them. A person who doesn't know what they're looking for and how it occurs in its natural habitat, in its naturalness, you could pass right. I'm sure I've been by many a creek bed or river bed, and there've been threads of gold all in the rock, but I didn't know what to look for, what it even looks like. So just, it just passed right by me because I didn't know what to look for and what it looks like. The Buddha said that we can know that this life is like a dream. And once we know this life is like a dream, everything takes on a different kind of, we just have a different perspective about everything. And so he tries to inculcate our mind. He gives us a little bit of what we need right now to take the next step. And then right behind that, he gives us the end of the story, at which we can't understand, but he already dropped it in there while we were listening to that little piece that we thought we needed or that little piece that we wanted. And he throws that other end of the end goal in there. And that just kind of like falls on deaf ears in between the parts that we want. But he just keeps throwing them in there. And after a while, that starts to get in there and cogitates a little bit, and some different kinds of questions come up. Different ways of examining things, looking at ourselves, pondering. And gradually the mind starts to shift and change because those little nuggets of the absolute truth bring the brightness that shines on our narrow little world with our own views and our understandings and our lack of understandings. And the more light that comes into the room of our being, the more we see and understand, and the more our perspectives shift and our questions change. We don't ask the same questions. And the more we ask these different questions, the more our understanding seems to increase just by the very nature of asking the question, which gives us a clue to the fact that in asking the question, there is some aspect of us that already knows the answer. But we have to ask the question because that's what overrides our sixth consciousness, asking the question. And we think so much we need the answer, but what we really need is the question. That's where we get looped up and turned around and wanting the answers. But the path towards truth comes in asking the questions. Buddha Master said in cultivation, we must go from small to large, from those close to us to those distant from us, fostering a very magnificent, noble, and unselfish state. The fruit that is free of self can only be established upon the state of unselfishness. If one cannot even sever selfishness, then one is all the more incapable of severing attachment to self. So he said, to enable you disciples to progress and truly realize prajna, I have to constantly and patiently speak of topics that are just practical. That's why I explain methods of continual practice. All such explanations are for you to achieve prajna. Sister, can you turn the heat down? Or is it me? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Without the 5 aggregates, there would be no samsara of living beings. If there were no 5 aggregates, there'd be no existence of myriad phenomena in the world. Living beings would not exist. The cycle of reincarnation would not exist. I want to read it again. Without the 5 aggregates, there would be no samsara of living beings. If there were no 5 aggregates, there would be no existence of myriad phenomena of the world. Living beings would not exist. The cycle of reincarnation would not exist. However, when there are phenomena of the 5 aggregates or material phenomena, they all manifest in correspondence with one's own karma of causality, stemming from the aggregate of action. The reflection of myriad phenomena into the actual state of the aggregate of action, the making of creating of karma, that is the effect of myriad actions. Eventually, these manifest as reality. Anyone can become accomplished as long as a person truly cultivates oneself. When one's practice reaches a certain level, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas naturally open up your prajna wisdom, and then you reap the fruit that you deserve. Then he gave a warning. Remember, I do not belong to esoteric Buddhism nor exoteric Buddhism. I belong to pure Buddhism. I learned the Buddha Dharma of all Buddhas without sectarian differentiation. There's no such thing as Tibetan Buddhism. You should understand that in this world system, all teachings of Buddhism originated from and were transmitted by Shakyamuni Buddha. He is the Buddha of this world. What happened is, after the Buddha's teachings spread to Tibet, Tibetan Buddhists combined the local Bon religion into Buddhism. The main body of Buddhism is the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. The term Tibetan Buddhism is incorrect. We should not forget about the origin. It is all Buddhism and Buddha Dharma transmitted by Shakyamuni Buddha. And it is only after that that our yidams and our patriarchs have their rank. You disciples should not be afraid as long as you comport yourself well, as long as you cultivate yourself well through continual practice, you will attain very great accomplishment. You will have the karmic reward of good fortune and have wisdom. All can be perfect with you. If you do not comport yourself well, you will fail. This is not to scare you. Learning from Buddha, cultivating oneself must be done in an earnest and down-to-earth manner. One must exert steadily and make solid progress. This is what I say to you, and this is also what I do. And that was his entrance into the teaching on the four great elements that I want to share today. So we are comprised of the four great elements. And what is that?
Water, fire.
Okay, those are the four great elements. Then there are two other elements. That's why sometimes you see the four elements and you sometimes see the six elements. So what are the other two elements? Well, space and consciousness. Space and consciousness. And then consciousness gets broken down into all different kinds of consciousness. The lesser one, which includes mind in the worldly sense, and the highest one, which includes mind, which would be of the Tathagata nature. So this is something we already know, right? Like we need, okay, the human body, earth, air, fire, and water, in space and with consciousness. So like what more needs to be said about that? I mean, like it's just something that we know. But now he's inculcating the mind and he's taking this a little bit deeper. All bodhisattvas use three prajnas to realize reality, to illuminate and see the emptiness of the twofold truth of birth and death. One sees with illumination emptiness of forms, which are combinations of the four great elements of earth, water, fire, and air or wind. All sentient beings and insentient things are formed through combination of these four great elements. Everything with and without life composed of a combination of these four great elements. The element of earth includes all solid entities with concrete form. So the quality of earth is solidity. But if you take a handful of sand, you might think that's not that solid. So when the earth element is combined with the water element, that includes all liquid substances, anything with a fluid nature, then it brings about or produces the solidity of the earth. So if I had a handful of sand and I added water to it, I could compact it. Too much water and it becomes mud. The right amount of water, the earth becomes solidified into a malleable form, right? And so the quality of water, then, you could say, is cohesion that holds things together. All sources of energy that can produce heat are called the element of fire. And that includes friction and a kind of movement from the moving of our, bowels that allows the digestion of food that gives us heat in our body. You notice that if you like just sit in a cold room, you stay cold. But if you in that cold room and you start moving, that movement, that's what one of the greatest contributors to old people dying. We stop moving. We just don't feel like it, you know. So I'm constantly reading about how important it is to move. As an old person, we just stop moving, and I'm like, that sounds good, but I don't feel like it, you know. Uh, and so I don't. And the more I don't, the less I can, until finally you just can't move. Um, this is important to look at things in this way because this is what motivates us to do the hard things. We might have to look at it for a long, long time. But he says, if you keep looking at it, and you can't like just keep looking at it, but you have to look at it with a sense of its usefulness, and you can shift the mind's, what's the word when you like don't care about something? Yeah, you can shift the mind. Great word. That wasn't the one I wanted, but that's perfect word. You can shift the mind's apathy, and you can get something into gear. And as you move into gear, you can make that shift. So that's how we are about goodness. We start thinking about all the good things, but we don't like kicking into gear. And we think that for the thinking of it, that we have, but that's where the aggregate of action comes in. So the Buddha is always talking about cultivation, not just in the sense of thinking things, but actually putting them into action. And from a sedentary position, it's hard to get started, but get started we must. Or you cry many tears. The wind includes all formless, invisible forces that propel. So you can see how the aggregates need a certain sound, a certain symphony, a certain harmony in order to optimally exist. Need the power of the wind to propel. We need the force of heat to activate. We need the earth to actually provide the substance, and we need the water to allow that to be formed into something. It takes these four. And if any is out of balance, too much of one, not enough of another, you'll get something, but it may not be what you want to get. The Buddha Master talked about when he was young, just before this passage, and how he had no concern when he first got introduced or awakened to spiritual things. He was so overcome by it, he had no interest in anything else. You could say that he had a lot of earth, but he didn't have enough water to form it into something cohesive and useful. And so he would be outside the temple painting all the time. And when, they would ask him how much he wanted for his paintings, he'd say, like, whatever, just give me, whatever. He didn't care. He loved doing what he was doing, the painting, and then he took all the money and he gave it to the temple. So then one day, his teacher called him in and talked to him about that. And he said, that's a wrong view that you don't care about good fortune, because you could do so much more if you had the right understanding about that. He said, that's just depending on luck. And so sometimes I cry. I cry because I don't care about money. I don't care. Never have. Once I discovered the Dharma, never have. He said, that's not practical. Here I am, 73, and I'm just hearing this in a way that this might not go for you, but the reason why I'm sharing it with you is because each one of us has our own obstacles. One might be not caring, not even wanting to put one's mind on that, because they only want to put their mind on the Dharma. For another, it might be the exact opposite thing. For another, it may not have anything to do, wherever there's been something unfulfilled in your life, it may not have anything to do with money. It's something else. But what I'm saying to you is the Dharma is not something that just sits idly over here on a shelf that we pick up and read, that it's divorced from our life. It is to point absolutely to the good and the bad karma in our life, that we can know how to rectify it. It could have something to do with how we feel about other people, about relationships, about, our careers, about how we serve in the world, about, what we want. It could be about anything, but it is about something. And it's up to each one of us to figure out what it's about for us in life. In life, not apart from life as a topic we're interested in, but in life. And then after we figure it out, because that's where the stress is in our life, that's where the discomfort is, that's where the unknowing is. Once we figure it out, then we have to enter into the flow, Flow, the flow of life. Or you could even call, sometimes we use the word like the universe. Like, what the hell is that? The universe, But we could say that the universe is really just the flow of life. To live is to let go and enter the flow of life, not be attached to anything, not be attached to a a bad view, of course, but not even to be attached to a good view, to not be attached to anything, is what I'm saying. And so we like just fully embrace that everything is constantly flowing. And that's where the true liberty and the freedom comes from. That is what emerges, is the true freedom. Now, so I'm talking about something, and I would often talk about, like my husband, how he loved uh, money and money making and all those kinds of things. And one day I went to get a life reading from a yellow hat sect Taoist master. And when I sat in the chair, the first thing he said to me is, "I feel so sorry for your husband." Now, I was paying for this, and I'm paying for this for me, because I want to know something, about me. The first thing he starts talking about, how sorry he feels for my husband. And one of the questions that I had was whether I should leave. So now I'm not sure I need to even get a reading from this guy, because right away he's on my husband's side. When I say on my husband's side, like he's looking in and he's seeing his life and saying, "I feel so sorry for him that he got hooked up with you." That's what he's saying. you know. Um, Now, the thing is, my husband had driven me over to his, temple for the reading. He's sitting out there in the waiting room, and when the guy comes to get me, you know, he asks me, "Don't you want your husband present?" It's like, no. He was my driver. He took me there. I mean, but he asked me in front of him, "Don't you want your husband around?" I said, "No." And so Jay was cool with that. He understood. He wanted whatever could get me straightened out, to get me straightened out. So he was glad to take me over and talk to somebody. And so we sat down, and so he starts this reading. And he says, "Because I feel so sorry for him, because life wasn't fair to him since he got hooked up with you." And then he went on to tell me about all the success in life that was Jay's um, ripening karma, except that he fell in love with me. And I was not interested in any of that. So it was sort of like a chain around the neck of like a dog that could really charge forward. But there I was, the chain holding him back. I said, "Well, to tell you the truth, I came here to talk to you because for what my karma is, he's holding me back. But I love him and he loves me. And I'm trying to, find a place in this for what the expression of my true heart. And I can't, they clash. I just can't bring them together. And I'm at that place that something has to give." Now, my point in mentioning this is because I felt that I was the noble one. I had all the right ideas, you know. None of that means anything to me. I felt that all the money that we earned was due to our employees. All we did basically was say yes or no and count the money. We didn't really work. We worked at ideas, and they worked. So I felt that they should share equally in the money. Are you nuts? it's our business. They get paid for what they do. And I just had such a aversion to that whole kind of mentality. So I knew that being in that wasn't for me. We could have 1,000 people in the audience for, to hear a motivational seminar on flipping real estate. And I knew that out of 1,000 people in that audience, there were 5 people who could be successful at this. Only 5. The rest didn't have the confidence. They didn't have the money. They were just pipe dreaming. They didn't have, the connection, didn't know how to get the connection. We wouldn't be able to present the plans. I knew all of that about them. But they pay $1,000 for that day-long seminar. And I knew when I came back to Chicago 3 months later, most of them would be right back in that same room, paying again. And I felt like I was cheating them because I knew that they would not do much with it. And so after every workshop, I go to my hotel room and I'd just cry. I'd cry because I felt like I was taking advantage of them, using them. I was doing my job. Companies paid us to do this kind of stuff. I was doing my job, but it was not the job for me. So I should have stepped away from that long before I did. But I didn't, because, like we were a power couple. You know how that goes, the power couple. And I stayed in so long that I began to lose myself. And so Jay suggested I go talk to somebody. And I did. And I went and I talked to a therapist, and the therapist said, that work is not the work for you. You need to find your own work and do that. And I did. And the more I did my kind of work, in one way, the happier Jay was, because he didn't have to contend with me and my aversion, keeping him from doing what, mattered to him and what could be a contribution. He was very good at his work. He was very good at taking the few, the 5 out of 1,000, who really could do something and making something. My eyes were on the 995 that couldn't. What becomes of them? So after some time, tributary became a stream, became a river, became an ocean. And for me to function, I felt I needed to go in an independent route, a different route. And it was a sad time, because other than some kind of idea about a life mission, he felt like he was also on a mission and I was on a mission. There were just 2 different missions. But I can say that, even though now I would be able to totally be in that environment. I could totally stay married to him. And it wouldn't bother me because I have a different kind of understanding, a different kind of wisdom now. But then, with what I had, no way to do. So what I'm saying is there comes a place that when you start looking at everything that we have in stirred into our life, and they seem like they're such big, humongous issues. But the issue is not with those things. The issue is with our own wisdom. And so while we think of the highest aspects of Buddhism as like getting out of or stepping out of this world, actually, it's not. It's being able to be fully in this world with full insight about what to do, how to do, when to do, where to do, why to do, and for whom to do. But because we have our preferences and we get caught up in the sensations of our preferences, that we create all of these problems for ourselves. So part of the wisdom that comes from the Dharma is learning how to fully embrace the flow of life. And flow implies changes. Not just the things we're familiar with, the things we're comfortable with, but the things that have to be done in order for other things to happen. And it requires entering into this stream or this river, this flow of life, a certain way of viewing and understanding the insubstantial nature of everything that is present in what we call life. And everything heretofore has been very substantial. Whatever's affecting me, the 8 worldly winds, it all is very substantial. But he's saying, can't you see that it is not substantial at all? It is just the coming together of myriad things that produce an illusory appearance. Actually, whatever value it has, you've given to it. You've made it up in your mind. And you said, this is what it is. But that goes on, not just the things that we think, it goes down all the way down to even our own bodies. That without these coming together of the aggregates, there is no one. And he says that's hard to understand in the beginning. But if you keep looking at it, you see that it is true. That if these 4 aggregates fall out of solution, because there was a time of them coming together, for everything that has a beginning, that has an ending, then they're going to dissolve. And what was will not be anymore. So he says we have to look at all of this without attachment. We think it means to detach, to cut off, to sever. But it's not so much that, and that has to do with how feeble words are and how these feeble words take us down wrong tributaries and we're lost our whole life. but it's not detaching. It's like holding them with non-grasping, non-attachment. Detachment create two different connotations in the mind. That's why at some point it gets better to say it's like this instead of having a concrete word or a word that concretizes a view. So it's like a non-attachment, not detached, but non-attached. And that we experience this through the feeling aggregate. There is only pleasant, unpleasant, and neither pleasant nor unpleasant. Everything, our response to, our sense about everything comes down to just these three feelings. When the internal basis meet the external basis, the consciousness arises, these three make contact, and with contact comes feeling. And feeling is the beginning of becoming. Becoming, if you look at the links of dependent origination, becoming is way down the road. So how come he didn't start with becoming? Because there is something that conditions or becoming, that creates becoming. And this part of this practice that we engage in is really declassifying words. Declassifying words. Because after the four great elements combine, right, our human bodies arise from the combination of these four elements. However, this human thus established is false, it's provisional, it's subject to impermanence, it will arise, exist, decay, and die or vanish. That is why a human being is called a false appearance. Doesn't mean that you're not real, you're not sitting in that chair, and I'm not here. It's shifting our sense away from our notion of permanence is the order of the day. Our reliance upon expectation of things not changing. That's why we're unhappy. That's why we feel trepidation. That's why we're afraid when we hear certain news, because we have an expectation of things not changing, things being the same. And we are attached to them in these kinds of ways. But there's some cultures, and we think we're so evolved, and we're like all wrapped up and bound up by our attachments. And some cultures, where they don't have anything, they hardly have anything. And they're not attached, they have this idea of things come and things go, and they live happier with so much less because they have that kind of freedom of mind. They have that realization that us think tank kind of people think it's a crazy way, immature way, not dignified, but when you're really, really smart, give me a word. Give me another word from intellectual. No, when a society thinks that they are so evolved, such an evolved society, or culture, our culture is, then we get this idea we're so highly evolved, and they are third world or primitive minds, and yet they have more happiness than we do, because we are attached to things that are what? Impermanent. Mhm. Not just the things. Things include situations. Not just situations. It includes people, because we're impermanent. And so part of our practice, the greatest part of our practice, is cultivating this view that we can hold lightly what comes into our life and what goes out of our life. And I mean, really, not just pretending we do, but I mean, really looking at it until we can see the truth of that. And then you can go through anything in life without despair, without grief, without worry, without fear, without anger, without trepidation. You would try new things. Now, who knows? It might work. You could be with something, no need, the grass is really not greener on the other side, or it might be greener, but they used, what's that stuff that poison you? Yeah, but they use hazardous, yeah, exactly. And so a kind of contentment begins to emerge in life, and also a kind of equality of view. And that's where our freedom lies. Well, what happens if I'm not passionate about this? What happens? I don't care how passionate I am about the Dharma. One day I'm going to die, and 2 days later, all of that will be forgotten. Or somebody might mourn for a week. I remember the story in the Bible about, I forget which king it was. Was it David? Yeah. Yes. So David has a son, and David's son is sick. And David's sad because he had a general that was faithful to him, and he would go out and win victories for him. And one day, while he was out winning a victory for David went out on his balcony, and he saw a woman afar off on another balcony, naked, and he desired her. Found out that it was this general's wife. So the next time he comes in, he entertains him, his great friend, his great general, and then he sends him back out on the battlefield. But then he calls in his top commandos, I don't know the right words for these things, that would be his trenchmen. And he tells them, now when you get to this hill, you withdraw. So they go out to battle, and that's what happens. So when they draw, you know what happened to the general, right? He got killed. So David went to console his wife and married her when they had a child, and this child got sick. So everybody's tipping around the castle or whatever it was. And then David realizes they're tipping around because my son has died. He said, now, nobody wants to be the one that has to tell him, because you know what happens to the bearer of bad news. They're right off of your head. So nobody wanted to tell David. But he got up and he said, well, I can see from all this tipping around that my son has died. He said, he will not come back to me, but I will go sometime in the future to him. And all up until this time, David was there in prayers and sackcloth and ashes. But the day he perceived that his son had died, he got up and he washed his face, took his seat on the throne, and began to continue to govern his kingdom and do his job. I never forgot that story. Said he won't come back to me. So it's time to get up. So as long as there was a chance that things could be better, he hung in with that. And he was petitioning and he was, trying to make amends and he was doing all. But when it was done, it was done. He got up and he got back to work. And that karma came to its fulfillment. And then he had another son by the name of Solomon. And he was considered the wisest king that ever lived. I'm saying this to say that whatever is going on in our life, it is the result of the action aggregate. And the action aggregate arises when in ignorance through selfishness. Right now, I'm 73 and Kay is 83. And I see her moving around and I'm looking at her for the first time. Really, for the very first time. She was always there my whole life. Or at least my whole spiritual life, stepping into Buddhism. She didn't know anything about it, didn't like it, still doesn't. But she felt when she met me in Panyadeepa, her job was to take care of us. And she has done that for 20 some years. That I could say was my good fortune, perhaps for stepping out and making and seizing the essence of my own human life. It cost me something, but I gained something. Some realness about myself and how I should use and live this life. So I don't regret any of that. None at all. But there she was, always there, feeding, clothing, keeping a roof over our head, whatever was needed. And I look at her now, and she's moving a lot slower. Or at least I'm noticing. Because usually I just come do my Dharma things, and then when, and it's way more than the 2 hours here. It's all of the people that I talk to. It's a lot, but it's what I do. It's what I enjoy. It's what I live for. So I haven't really given that much attention and appreciation to Kay. Her appreciation is if I like what she cooked. And I like it because I didn't have to cook it. I wouldn't care what it was, as long as I don't have to cook it, I like it. And I'm looking at how selfish that really is, though, because I'm not offering her anything. I'm just fully benefiting from, that's a nicer way of saying than to say using. I don't mean it in a using way, but I mean not appreciating deeply with the care in which it's given. But it's expedient for me. Really, I want you to listen to what I'm saying. And then when you leave, you don't have to think about my story because you don't have to live that. But think about your own story, is what I'm saying. And it's requiring something of me to see that. So sometimes when I want to do something else, some Buddhist thing, I'm obliged to like just go and sit there and talk with her because she'll sit at that couch all day waiting for me to come home. When I come home, I go to my room, deposit my stuff. I go in the kitchen. She's right in the kitchen. What can I fix you? What can I give you? You know, I cooked earlier today. I didn't know whether you were going to eat out or not, or eat over at the monastery. So I fixed food for you. And I'm like, no, I ate out and I ate over at the monastery. So I'll eat that tomorrow. Just okay, you know. But tomorrow I want something different than what she fixed yesterday. So then she'll fix that. And then, like I have a taste for this, and she'll fix that. And so I'm looking now at these things, you see. How much do I really love her? Oh, in my mind, I love her so much. In my mind, I do. But she loves me through her action. The Buddha Master says, action is the only thing that matters. She'll tell me about a book she's reading. I don't give a kitty about, some fiction that she's reading. I want to tell her something about the Dharma, or I want to just keep my mind around the Dharma. But now I listen, I let her tell me about what the cat did all day and things that matter to her. That's what I'm saying. We have to do better. We have to give more to get out of selfishness. I made one New Year's resolution, and I'm almost into February now, and I have kept that. I think I was a boy in my last life because I don't care nothing about finery like curtains and bedspreads and the room being clean and nice and orderly. I'm like, my socks are on the floor, just kind of like a boy. And but she likes things dainty and neat and pretty. And so I've been cleaning my room every few days, um, and it's really inconsequential to me. I mean, like I really don't care about it at all. My books are all over the place, you know. But she'll come by and glance in the room. She'll just close the door, you know. Vacuuming, useless. Big heavy vac, and she's pulling it out every couple of days. I'm like, okay, let's just get a housekeeper then. We can put in, as this is a small house, we could take care of it. It can't be that much. Just no, I like to do it. We tried a housekeeper and Kay cleaned up before the housekeeper could arrive. She did the floors, she did the bathrooms, she did everything. So I said, okay, we won't do this anymore. So that means I have to help her because she insists upon doing it. I didn't know how hard sweeping is. Sweeping is hard. I have respect for, I'm serious. It hurts my back to sweep. It really does. Sweeping is hard work. And I'm thinking, what Buddha land would I go to So I know, it's funny, but it ain't funny because I'm looking at it seriously. And that's what we have to do. He's asking us to take a deep, hard look into what we consider our compassionate action, our compassionate view. We have to have more than a compassionate view. We have to have compassionate actions. And he says that based upon this, one will reach certain levels. These are around worldly things, is what I'm saying to you. But then one will reach a certain level, and the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas will naturally open up one's prajna. Now, he's talking about these two things, and I'm not hopping all over the place. He's hopping all over the place. That's why I like him. I mean, like I perfectly got the man because my mind ties things together like that. They just don't run on the track. They're all over. That's how the world is. How do the elements disintegrate after a person dies? When one cycles in samsara, that means he dies. The great element of wind disperses first. One will cease to breathe. Next is the dispersal of fire. The body loses its warmth and becomes cold. Next to disintegrate is the water. Then the blood will congeal. The mouth and nose will often emit water. The lower body, your bowels may move and emit water. And the earth disperses last. It takes some years maybe for that to break down. The 5 organs or the intestines, the liver, stomach, and lungs start to rot. Then skin and flesh begin to rot. The muscles and tendons and bones rot last. Ultimately, the body becomes emptiness. There is nothing left. Thus, it vanishes completely, all as a result of impermanence. The one with the false name perishes. The false name is human being, cat, caterpillar. The one with the false name perishes. Without such realization, perishes. This is impermanence which mandates the path you will take. If one has realized the plain Dharmakaya while alive, one will abide in Nirvana without remaining reliance. That's it right there. If you realize the nature of emptiness, the emptiness of all things, applied yourself to non-attachment, to just being in the flow of ever-changing circumstances. Then you will, when you die, abide in Nirvana without remaining reliance on an appearance to come to the final conclusion, the final realization. Without such realization, although one's bodily form persisted and returned to emptiness, in reality, one's consciousness, that was the 6 of the 6 elements, right? One's consciousness transmigrates into another realm in accordance with the karma that has built up. This is very important. In this situation, one has realized the plain Dharmakaya during one's lifetime. Do you understand the concept of plain Dharmakaya? Plain Dharmakaya is simply the state of prajna, entering the state of prajna. When one practices reaches a certain level, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, those who have entered the state of prajna, will open up one's own state of prajna. It's like having a guide. You know, you can have a map. When I went to China, we had a map, but the map is not the territory. I'm going to tell you, it's not so good to go to China with just a map. You need to have a guide. And that guy needs to know something, because you can get in lots of trouble in China. You don't know the rules of the country. You don't know how you have to govern yourself. Things that we think like don't matter at all, get you 20 years there. Or the firing squad. After realizing prajna, with the realization appearing before you, when the previous thoughts, I'm going to take us somewhere to end this. When the previous thoughts have gone, the next thought has not yet arisen, and there is not attachment to this interim state where emptiness and existence are non-dual. This is the nature of awareness. This is the plain Dharmakaya. So, if you want to judge your progress, it's not on how much you know, but it's how often you touch that state where the last thought dropped off and the next thought has not arisen. When one can abide in that state constantly, they call it samadhi. And this samadhi doesn't mean dullness. It doesn't mean that one is like nothing's on your mind and you're just walking around in a fog. It means that one has reached the state of the equality of the aggregates, and the sense gates are all equal. So they have gone through a boundary until everything concerning that thing. We talk about omnipotence, all knowing, and we think that is, I know everything. So if you say a Buddha is omnipotent, all the knowledge of everything is in his head, is what comes to mind, omnipotent. But it doesn't mean that. The Buddha explained it very carefully when he asked them, which is more, the leaves in my hand or the leaves in the forest? And they said, the leaves in the forest. He said, the leaves in the forest is what I know. The leaves in my hand is just what I'm sharing with you. And he said, so you think I know everything then? He said, no, there's no such thing, because everything is independent, is dependently arisen, right? So he says, no, I don't know everything. He says, but whatever I turn my mind to, that thing I can fully penetrate. So omniscience has that kind of quality, the kind of quality that is not attached to your view. It's not attached to how you feel about something. It's not attached to what you want to happen. It's not attached to what you even have the power to make happen. Because you want it to be this way, you can make, and you have the ability to make it that way. It's not even about that. It's not having an attachment to anything at all. And when one has entered into that space, then one qualifies to be of use, because it is an unbiased uh, I was going to say unbiased interference, but I won't say interference. It's an unbiased action that promotes the highest and best. Having a baby is ugly at the moment, but once the baby comes out, you know, all things are beautiful. So it allows us to be able to pass through travail and say that has nothing in me. It has no part in me. And in this way, we will get through the conditions, the unfortunate conditions of life, the unfortunate effects. Now, they don't start showing up so much. They got plenty of time. But as we get more in a hurry to produce our goodness, then the ripening is going to come quicker for some things that are lying dormant there. By the same token, if our goodness is mediocre, they'll ripen and we're just in a shitstorm. Better is the more pure our goodness is and our virtue is, the higher a wall will be built. And our good fortune ripens now. Who knows? We may attain the great awakening before all the bad karma ripens. Attaining the great awakening is to absolutely neutralize karma. And so it will never ripen. So we'll live out our life then in the good fortune ripening. And then when we attain the realization, we learn that this was an illusory world, a world like a dream. Now that's a lot to wrap your head around. You can't hear it one time. You have to hear it again and again and put it up against this reality that you call reality. When you go to bed at night and you have a dream, you know, the characters in the dream are like, that's a real thing. They're not thinking, oh, I'm in this dream, but actually I'm laying there in the bed. They are the dream. But now you laying in the bed, when you wake up, you say, oh, that was a dream. This life is like that. And there is a waking up that we can realize, and we'll say, oh, this life that we think is real, that was just a dream. And so we wonder how these practices that we do come together with this kind of thought. And he says, you're using the wrong faculty to try to understand it. It's like using the sensation of touch to try to hear something. You know, you need the faculty of hearing. You need to use the ear for that. And so we're trying to use the sixth consciousness to try to understand reality. He says, oh, you're using the wrong faculty for that. And so he begins to introduce us, the Buddha, all the Buddhas, to the unawakened faculties that will help us enter into reality and wake up from the dream. So there's some kind of, as I'm closing, some kind of excitement. Oh, I think I still will close. I forgot we go till 2 now that we're down to 2 days a week, but this is where I think we should end. So we come to some kind of conclusion about what faculties we can use to understand this. And as we start stepping away from the faculties we need to be successful in this life, we can begin to understand this. And a kind of peace comes, a kind of confidence comes, a kind of sense that this is a momentary occurrence. And we start looking at what really matters, what is without birth and without death then, and that there actually is something. It's kind of like recognizing everything in this room, and then suddenly one becomes aware that there is space also. The space has a kind of form. It's an invisible form. It's invisible to this faculty that sees everything else. Yet it's still there. It's not there just because the eyes can't perceive it. The space still exists, but it's in an invisible form to the eyes. And it's like that when we try to answer some of these spiritual questions with words and intellectual thinking. It's not in the purview of that instrument, but it doesn't mean it's not real. We just have to awaken to another faculty. And this is where the saints and the sages come in, who start crossing over into that space. And they say, I can't describe it to you, but I'm saying over here, I can see the reality of it. Over here, I can know it experientially. There's just not enough words in our vocabulary and our construction to tell you about it. And they invite us to come. And we come with, let me pack up my stuff. When I was in China, I saw this lady, old lady, walking up a mountain with a piano strapped to her body. I mean, a real piano. It was a spinet kind, not a baby grand. It was a spinet kind of piano. But I mean, like that. I mean, on her back, old, walking up a mountain. I wouldn't last any time in China. I can tell you that. Can't even use a broom. But I've started. I've started sweeping and scrubbing the kitchen floor and sitting down and talking with her. Because she hasn't required it of me. But goodness requires it of me. And if we can make those changes, I mean, all I have to do is pick my socks up and put them in. She bought me a basket. Because she used to go around getting them. I'm like, stop messing with my things. Well, I thought, I was sitting there and I just washed it. I'm like, no, I'm gonna wear those again. Yeah. And she's happier. I can tell. She's not saying anything. And I'm not saying anything. But I do want to make her last days her best because she offered everything to me. And not because she offered it. I just want to. You know, and I would do things for people far away. I do things for other people all the time, tirelessly. You know, I don't feel tired about it at all. I don't even think of it as anything at all. So as these things come to your mind, don't poo-poo them and don't throw them away, because it's the little foxes that spoil the vine. And it's going to require changes of us, changes that we don't want to give because we've taken some things for granted, taken some people for granted, taken situations for granted. Just wasn't on our radar. Maybe it's not intentional taking for granted. You know, just not on our radar because our quality of compassion not quite high enough. Or we're thinking that this is more important than that, or more important than him or her, you know. And it requires something of me when I'd rather spend time doing something else. And when those things start to come up for you, pay attention. And then maybe you won't find yourself weeping every night like I do. Time's short now. And I'm so glad that it came while I still have breath, because then I can do something. You know, intention is important, even if you don't finish something. The Buddha said intention is the principal thing, the true intention. But know that whether your intention is good or not good, that when something is done, the law of karma kicks in. Like, I didn't mean to run over your foot, you know, with my tire, but, you know, my spatial thingy was off and I ran over your foot. I still crushed your foot. And that there is a consequence for that. So let us be careful in what we do and in how we do. And before we try to serve all living beings, serve the ones that are close to us in ways that matter, not to us, but ways that matter to them. Yeah. So I gave you a practice to do last week, or the last time we got together. And who did it? Okay. All right. Does anybody want to share anything? Okay, well, I want to add to that.
Yeah, we have a flagpole
Out where?
out there in the yard.
We do?
Yeah,
Well, that's good. Over there, they're turning that, you know, into a walk, part of the walking trail, um, right over in the back of our property right there. Hmm.
I will say, I'm not sure I understood exactly what I was doing when I did this.
Okay. All right. So the practice was really, really simple. The practice was sit in a meditation posture where you're comfortable, where you can sit easily. And thanks to Nancy and Brian, I'm able once again to sit on a cushion. Feels so much better than a chair. Thing about the cushion, when I sit on the chair, my body doesn't know whether I want to read, whether I want to talk, whether, you know, it doesn't know what I want to do, because I do lots of different things in the chair. But when I sit on the cushion, my body is not confused. It's like learning how to drive. You get behind the wheel and you struggle with every little thing. But then after you learn how to drive, your, what do you call that part of your system? Um, uh, autom-
Right? Yes.
auto, It's auto something. It's like this, you know, your body automatically knows what you need to do, and you don't have to remember. I don't have to remember to put the key in, to turn the key, to look in the mirror, set my thing, fix my seat. My body knows automatically when I get in what to do. I have to learn how to drive all over again every time I get in a car. That part of us that programs and remembers so that we don't have to consciously remember every time we do something. And so sitting like this is the same way. It will become, as soon as you sit, your whole mind body knows what what you want to do at this time. You know, it's like having a certain chair that you only use for this. Then your body remembers that when I do the sit here, this is what I want to be doing. And it's like that. So the body is stable so that it can like hold itself up. It can just stop. And wherever it stops, you like right, you're right there. It's some people sit with their legs off to the side. But if you do that, that's, crunching the body. The body's not stable in that way. So it should be where your points, you're sitting on your sits bones, you know, your knees are such that you don't have a lot of pressure on your knees. Your spine is aligned, not like reclining like this because that brings fatigue to the spine. Those comfy chairs, they're not good for meditation. So by the sitting straight up and imagining like right here at the used to be the soft spine, mine is getting soft again, once what do they say? Once a man, twice a child, so it's getting soft again like it was when I was a baby. But as if a string is here and you pulling from that byway. And when you do that, it instead of it being up here, which pulls the chin up, here pulls the face up from it in its frame, and it sets back, and the chin slightly goes in. And so the muscles, no, not the muscles, the bones of the neck like align, and the spine, because the head is heavy, the spine gets is not feeling the weight because, I mean, the body doesn't feel the fatigue because the bones are stacked naturally, one on top of the other. Somebody could sit for a long time. It just takes away the body discomfort that comes up quickly when you're trying to get still. You start to feel everything going on in your body. And so after doing this for a few times, you will feel as soon as you sit on that seat and correct yourself in that posture, there it is. One hand rests in the other. So we did some things a little differently as a Taoist, but just one hand resting on the other. Eyes projecting out and down, like this is flat, like this. Eyes projecting. And you can just take a breath. You can just gently close your eyes and sit for 2 minutes. But alternate, your hands can rest on your knees or your thigh. Just breathing naturally right now, not doing anything with the breath. And then after 2 minutes, just coming out. That's it, just 2 minutes. Then we put our hands together. As if we're listening intently to someone. Someone's talking back to us. We're processing, what we say, as if we're giving full attention. Right now, we're giving full attention just to the silence. And that's it. So now you've set up two patterns. One is the hand, so empty or this resting here. The second is engagement. And they're both the same inwardly. Just the stillness. And that's all I want you to do. That's it. So we'll start with this next time we come back. Because there's no way you can do this every day, a couple of times a day, and not notice something. So I'm listening to hear what is being noticed.
I thought that I could actually feel my breath more on the tip of my nose
Mm.
when doing this. And that I internally understood like the importance of technique in order to develop skill, which overcomes worldly wisdom. And so like even just doing these like 3 simple movements, I like began to understand that this is a type of skill that will allow my meditation to begin with intention. And so it like solidifies the mind in a way, but I don't know, everything became much more still and calm through just this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is. And this has to do with like our willingness to do simple things without thinking, oh, well, what does this do? Or how is, why is this important? We think for technologies to be great, they have to be convoluted and complex, but they don't. Many of the things that we're just beginning to discover with microscopes, telescopes, and cosmic implements, the Buddha discovered, and not just the Buddha, many sages over the years, just through a simple technique. We are an instrument. We just don't know how to use ourselves. But yes.
In doing all of that, the only issue I have is that this part of the back here, the lower back, is it supposed to be concave or straight? Because I find myself just that little part of the lower back as I sit, it goes.
I understand your question.
Concave.
I understand your question. Is there a chair that doesn't have arms on it? Can you bring that chair up here for me? And then I'm gonna close. My foot's around something. Yeah. Thank you, John. I'm gonna turn it this way. So if I was sitting in a chair, I usually, if I'm gonna sit in a chair, I'll take my butt to the base of the chair. I got on all these clothes. I think, can I take this off? You can put it underneath. Whoever's online, I'll see. Your back has unless you have some kind of physical, issue. Your back is kind of like this. Yeah. So there's a slight curve in the back. So the minute I put my back completely against a chair, I have changed the normal positioning of the back. And I've made it like this. So I'm just saying, just keep it like it, not in a rigid military fashion, but just letting it find its natural position. And it's good if it's not a kind of chair where the seat doesn't come back like that, So like a straight up kitchen chair is better, or a dining room chair if you're going to use a chair. One preferably without arms that doesn't really restrict you like this, but just allows you to be there with feet flat on the floor. Now, if you notice with the head, a lot of us have fatigue and a lot of us fall asleep because of the weight of the head, bringing the head down, and we end up going into a nod because, like I say, the head is heavy and it's hard to hold up. But when we are in our right posture, if you think about this, you notice that there's something that instead of the chin jutting out, that we're looking up when we imagine the string pulling, it does something like that. So it goes from like that to like that, and it raises the head. It stacks over the vertebrae, and now the head is weightless. The head is weightless. So there's this slight chin tucking, not so much that it's like that, but it's just ever so slight from here to there. That's it. From here to there. And now it just everything. It's a support without bringing fatigue to the body. Or like that. Or like that. You can even touch the thumbs. It creates a circular energetic. And just 2 minutes. Now I'm ready to engage and to listen, to be aware, the outer world. And can you tell the difference even in the hand movement or the hand well, I don't want to pre-frame it. Well, I will just say this, that finding out where the mind is will be, it'll be an amazing discovery for you, because when you're like this and you're focusing, it appears that one is focusing inward. There is a surrender. There's just a going inward that one can recognize and appreciate. When I'm here, there's a going outward, especially with the eyes open before, that gives a directed. The mind is making connection with its outer world, but still in that same empty space. And then we start to find, first we'll see really concretely, there is an inner focus and there's an outer focus. Inner and outer. And we can know the difference between inner and outer. But in time, it won't be I have an inner focus or I have an outer focus. In time, it'll be a recognition that the mind is not anywhere. It's not inside. It's not outside. The mind is not, you can't localize it anywhere. And when one can get to that realization, one then is able to project the mind, direct the mind, and expand and contract, can move it, and no longer controlled by the mind, but takes up one takes up one's wisdom role in directing the mind. Instead of the mind leading us, then one begins to have control of their mind in a very powerful way. But first, it needs to be conditioned to direct the mind in the right ways, right? Okay, and that's why you have the precepts and the practices. Thank you so much.
May we finely tune the instrument of this vessel, using our patience, the diligence, and our deep inner wisdom. May we see and use the gift of the leaves in hand for the greatest benefit of those that are near, that are far, and the space in between.
So I know why we should be looking at these things going into the retreats that we're going into, is because the mind, when the mind lets go of one thing, it picks up something else to focus on. And so I don't want us to get so caught up on, ritualistic things that we think doing those rituals are now going to be the thing, it doesn't mean that we don't do them, but that we understand in our doing what is getting done. And so we don't just replace thinking now with ritual. Or you'll be losing ground instead of gaining.
Thank you.